ReBoot is a television show for kids set in the world inside a computer. We brought all the concepts, the programs, sprites and so on that make your computer run. We brought them to life, gave them character and depth, and they have to fight off things like viruses, they have to fight off computer games, and we also introduced this element of the user, which we never followed up on. Sorry fans, we never followed up on that one. The original core team that developed the idea for ReBoot was Ian Pearson and myself. Ian was, he's a great guy, he's my best mate, he's a creative guy. So together we came up with the concept for the show and started to push it around and roll it around. It got bigger and bigger. And then we realized when it became something that looked like it might actually go somewhere, we needed advice on, how to make it in TV. So we brought on board my lecturer from college, John Grace. He was a bright guy who knew a lot about animation, traditional animation, and TV production, because he'd created and produced a stop motion show called Portland Bill years before. So he knew the ins and outs of selling a show and getting it off the ground. So he was a creative guy, and he had insight into moving forward and developing the idea and selling it to a network and so on. Phil Mitchell, I was at college with. We both studied graphic design and animation together. I knew he was a creative, wacky guy who had some pretty good ideas as well. So we brought him onto the team, and that was the core team, the hub, as we were called later. The four guys who sort of molded and developed and pushed the idea forward and actually brought it to production companies to try and sell the idea as a TV show.
He's enveloped.
He's confined.
Confined? He's trapped.
Trapped.
He's trapped, yeah.
He's trapped.
I don't think so.
I hate when this happens. It's like a reckoning. It's your fault, and I hate it.
The concept for ReBoot came about partly because of the medium. Because we were going to be working in CGI, and because at that time, because we're talking mid-80s here, CGI was by today's standards, incredibly crude and primitive. Boxy, flat-shaded, nothing shiny, no curves, no shadows, no things like this. It was a very, the Dire Straits Money for Nothing promo, very primitive. A lot of people looked at the concept and said, well, it's going to look kind of weird. You're going to have to explain why it looks so weird. We answered that one by saying, well, it's set inside a computer. So that's why there are no shiny objects. That's why there's no hair and fur and mirrors and shadows and things like this, and why it's a single point light source, and why everything's blocky and cubic. And it was the premise for the show came from the medium that the show was produced in. We knew because as soon as we said to people, well, it's set inside a computer, they went, oh, right, that's why it looks like that. Of course, yeah, silly me. The ironic thing is that as the show took a good 9 or 10 years to get off the ground, during which time computer animation developed and got better and better and better. So by the time we actually produced the show, you could do shiny objects, and you could do shadows, and you could do multiple light sources and curvy things and smooth things.
They say the user lives outside the net and inputs games for pleasure. No one knows for sure, but I intend to find out. ReBoot!
The first episode produced was actually the second episode in the running order. That was an episode called Racing the Clock. And it took, including pre-production, it took the best part of 9 months, I think, to produce that episode.
Looks like Formula One. Good thing we know the formula. ReBoot!
We had to build everything. We had to build all the characters, we had to build all the sets, locations, props, everything, and work out how we were going to make the characters talk, develop the software to make the characters talk, etc., etc., etc. So the first episode, we were basically building the entire universe and all the characters, and working out how to animate it, render it, get it to tape, edit it. So we were answering every question as we went, so it was pretty hellish. that first episode.
My business is doomed. End of file. Log off. I give up. I'll never be as cool as Dot.
Oh, compile up. Act your age. There's a simple solution to every problem. Bob, you deliver the package just this once. Enzo, you continue your business and don't quit file so easily.
The second episode, by comparison, I think took 3 months maybe to make. And then after that, we managed to get it down to, we averaged out at 8 weeks an episode. And some of the early episodes, because we were very much under the gun in terms of delivery, we're always behind schedule. Some of those early episodes we managed to crank out in, one of them we did in less than a week, I think, which was insane.
Wait up!
Excuse me? Pardon me? Thank you. Don't mind me, I'm just taking the lead.
We were doing something that no one had ever done. And a lot of the people we were working with in terms of sound and editing and writing were from a traditional animation background. And what we were doing was way more like live action production than animation. So, and it was a process that we all had to learn as we went along. Because we were working with people who had a great deal of experience in that traditional world. And they were going, well, this is how you do it in traditional animation. And we were going, we're not doing traditional animation, we're doing something completely different. So there was always that little bit of friction and a steep learning curve as we went along.
Bob, what are you doing here?
Me? I'm here to rescue Enzo. What about you?
Enzo called me. Why don't you just zip along now? I've got things under control here.
Oh, really? I'm surprised you could find time in that busy schedule of yours to save your own brother.
Well, I'm surprised you were even available. I thought you'd be too busy, living on the edge and all.
Oh, brother.
I can watch those early episodes and go, okay, that's where we learned about sound, and that's where we learned about the music, and that's where we learned about the script writing. I can see each battle, if you like, being checked off the list as I go through those early episodes. And as soon as you show the sound guys that first episode, and they go, oh, we see what you mean now. Or as soon as you show the network the first episode, they're very happy. But they're also like, now we see where you're going. Everybody, we learned together, and the show just got better and better, I think, as it went along.
Perhaps this is not such a disaster after all.
Season 1 of ReBoot was very much, you could almost typical Saturday morning fare in that each episode had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Nothing too harsh, nothing too dangerous, nothing too exciting. And by the end of the episode, the problem is resolved and everything's back the way it was and moving on. And that's mostly because we were kind of too busy just trying to get the shows done. We were under the gun constantly. So the first season, we used a bunch of established writers from LA who were very good at that kind of episodic television.
I'm back. Did you miss me?
The tear, it's gone. But how?
Just a little command I picked up at the armory. Like these two.
What are they?
You'll see, or maybe you won't. Adios.
It did mean that we ended up with some scripts for a 21-minute episode that were 52 pages long, and we had to do some severe editing once we got them into the Avid, but it was a sort of love-hate relationship with the writers. We spent many hours on the phone yelling at them, but we loved them as well, sort of thing. They were all great people and came up with some great ideas, which are on the screen, so you can't really argue with that.
I've always wanted to do that.
When we started production on season 2, we being the core team of the creators of the show, we kind of took charge of the direction of the show and the arcs that we were following in terms of storytelling and so on.
Megabyte! You won't get away with this!
No time to talk now, Bob.
we didn't have to worry so much about just getting the shows out the door. We could actually look around and take charge of some of the more creative aspects of the show and bring them more in line with what we wanted to do.
Well, what do you think? Such language.
ReBoot did get darker as it went along. I think this is a natural evolution for any show. You look at just about any show out there and they do tend to get a little bit darker as they go along. With us it was perhaps more intentional than with some other shows.
I have a message for your sister.
I am a guardian. I'm not your messenger.
You are what you have always been, a mere delivery boy. Do not provoke me further. It is by my will alone you survive this encounter. Be well advised to remember that.
In season 3, we actually planned the whole season as 4 sets of 4 episodes that had like 4 arcs. You know, so each episode was a story, each 4-episode arc was a story, and the whole season had a story to it as well.
But Dot, don't worry. She's a Matrix. You survived. I know she'll have found a way to do the same.
I think as a storyteller, you just want to get your teeth into it a little more and tell bigger, grander stories with you know, consequences and things that reach beyond the realm of that Saturday morning show.
Enzo. No.
One of ReBoot's greatest strengths was the characters in the show. We, you know, even if I say so myself, I think we created some pretty neat characters. And it was vitally important to get the right voice for each one of them.
I hate when this happens.
Bob was our hero, and we needed an archetypal hero voice, but we also needed a little bit of depth to it and a little bit of vulnerability and so on. And when we heard Michael Benier's voice, we immediately said, oh, that's what Bob sounds like.
Sorry guys, end program. Better luck next cycle.
What we didn't know at the time was Michael brought something else with him. He had like a warmth and a vulnerability to his voice and to his acting.
What's it like in the supercomputer?
Well, it's got lots of RAM, incredible capacity, and you can access almost anything. It was nice to visit, but it sure is good to be home.
He would read a line that when we'd written the line, we were thinking, oh, this is our hero, he's being really cool. Michael, when he read the line, would kind of ham it up a little, and we'd listen to it and go, that's really funny, because he's trying to be cool.
Alpha wing clear of deck. Proceed heading 1138. Stay frosty.
When we wrote it in the script, Bob, the hero, was being cool. When Michael delivered it, he was kind of cheesy with it. And we went, no, that works. Because he's trying to reassure everybody. And everybody knows he's trying to reassure them. So they all kind of look at him sideways and go, yeah, right, okay, Bob. But they love him for it. And so did the audience. As soon as everybody saw that sort of vulnerability in the hero, which Michael brought to the voice record, it really clicked. And then we started writing stuff for Michael to read like that.
Glitch! Anything! Like falling off an analog.
Ian Corlett came on board later when we had a bit of a scheduling conflict, shall I say, with Michael Benier being the voice of Bob. And Ian, who we'd used on a bunch of other shows as well, including ReBoot, stepped into the breach and did a sterling job filling in for Michael as Bob.
You just can't talk in these things.
And then, because people would listen to Ian and go, he's good, but it's not really Bob, is it? You know, oh, I miss Bob kind of thing. And that developed into an entire plot point, which we then used in season 4, where we ended up with 2 Bobs, and we actually brought Michael back. So we had Michael and Ian both as Bob at the same time.
It's impossible to get
I'll
surgery.
try again.
If
You
I don't...
need after you.
No, thanks.
Kathleen Barr played Dot in the show.
Cavalry's here, Bob. Get Hexadecimal out of here. I'll hold him as long as I can.
We always liked our women strong. We always used to joke, okay, where's Dot in this scene? Oh, she's off baking cookies. And Dot was never baking cookies. Dot was an entrepreneur, she was a businesswoman, and she could also kick butt.
Over here, big boy.
Kathleen, she's just stunning. She could do, you know, the emotional scene, she could do the angry stuff, and she could sing as well.
He's all right. He's okay. He's the sprite that brightens our day. There's no doubt, girls, you better watch out. He's Alphanumeric.
She's just an all-rounder and just brought Dot to life, really. I can't imagine anyone else playing Dot.
Dot!
The new and improved.
When we originally conceived ReBoot, and obviously it was going to be a Saturday morning animated show, the last thing Ian, Phil and myself wanted in the show was a kid. Because all Saturday morning shows had kids in them, and they were really annoying, and they got in the way, and they were a pain in the neck, and we hated them. Chris Bruff said, you have to have a kid in the show, because you need somebody for the audience to relate to. And he actually said, and I quote, you've got to have a little Enzo running around in there. Now, I don't know where he plucked the name Enzo from, but it stuck.
A major surge of goons showed up at the diner and started to completely offline the place. I mean, jack out, crash, crunch, backslash, delete, trash, log off.
Enzo.
What?
I think Bob gets the picture.
We actually then started to like him because we started to use him in a way that drove the story forward, and I ended up loving the little guy. You know, to say that we all hated the concept in the beginning, ended up loving him, and he's the heart and soul of the show. He's the beating heart of the emotion of the show.
I am Guardian Matrix, charged with defending this system. 2 viruses take over my home? I don't think so!
The benefits of having a real boy doing Enzo far outweighed the problems we had, because we did have to recast. Our original Enzo was a guy called Jesse Moss, who's now a successful grown-up actor. And he was awesome.
Dude! Bob's in major trouble, and it's all my fault! Ah!
And he was a great little actor as well. Unfortunately, I think it was towards the end of season 1, his voice started to go, and the squawks would come out, and it's like, oh God, we're in trouble. So then for season 2, we had to recast, and I think we ended up using 4 Enzos by the time we were finished.
I'm a copy, a backup, and I'm okay. Us copies have got to stick together.
Fong was the wise old one in the show, and we went with the time-honored cliche of having an elderly Asian gentleman voice for the character, so we could have a lot of that mysticism and so on.
There is an old README file that says you should keep your friends close and your enemies even closer.
We actually tried using an elderly Asian gentleman, but it didn't really work out. So Mike Donovan, who was one of the guys we had on the show doing multiple voices. Mike Donovan was the voice of Fong, and he was amazing, as he is at everything. He later directed a whole bunch of, most of, actually, seasons 2, 3, and 4.
The city's read-only room, a storehouse of all information since the very beginning of Mainframe.
Whoa! Pixelacious!
And my favorite way to become smarter, by reading.
We let him off the leash when he played things like Mike the TV, who's like, whoa, crazy, wacky American news guy. So, you know, he got to play both the docile characters and the wacky characters.
This is Mike the TV, coming to you live from the heart of downtown Mainframe. The city has been restored, and all our heroes can take a well-earned break.
Megabyte was the villain in the show, and we only ever had one choice for Megabyte, and that was Tony Jay, who's a classical actor who's done a bunch of, you know, he's been in Disney movies and stuff like that. He's done every car commercial known to man. Stunning voice, deep, rich, booming.
I haven't felt this good since my first infection. Now I shall erase Mainframe and rebuild it in my image.
He was the only choice for us. We went through a few back and forths with ABC about choice of actor, but Tony brought gravitas to the role. You just heard that voice with that character, and that was all she wrote.
Now I have my dear sister's power at my command. Nothing can stand before me. Mainframe will burn, and Megaframe shall rise out of its ashes.
Hexadecimal in the show was Megabyte's sister, and she was crazy as a loon. The whole concept with her was that she had godlike power, but she was insane. She could destroy the entire universe by snapping her fingers, but she was too crazy to think like that. Or was she? She was always a wild card, and she was very theatrical, and she was very outrageous, and her moods would swing to like girlish charm to like deadly psychopathy. And Shirley Milner was perfect for the role of Hexadecimal.
How sad. All of Mainframe doomed.
She's a stage actress, and she's theatrical and entertaining and loud and crazy, but also very vulnerable and very motherly if she wants to be. And she just could ride that wave, that chaos wave that Hexadecimal trailed behind her.
I was just picturing what I will do to you once I am free of your little toy.
You have no idea the power you try to control. Chaos will always triumph over order.
It is the way of things.
Enough!
Partway through season 3, we took the Enzo character, who was a young boy, and kind of put him through a time warp where he grew up into this huge, muscle-bound hunk of a man. And we brought Paul Dobson in to do the voice of Matrix. And he had this great voice. He was like the classic Clint Eastwood, but down a few octaves, kind of deep. I'm Matrix.
There's no Guardian here. I'm Matrix, the renegade.
Because the Matrix had grown from that young boy that we'd created, he had this hard, crusty exterior, but underneath was this vulnerable young man. And Paul was great at doing swinging between the Clint Eastwood steel-faced, and then when nobody was looking, he could do the emotional, you know, I'm not good enough, and kind of angsty stuff. Paul Dobson was wonderful at that.
I'm tired of waiting for things to happen. And I'm tired of these stupid games. We've been living like viruses, infecting games and systems. This has to end. We're taking control. The search for Mainframe and Bob begins now.
His companion, Andrea, who was a character we introduced late in season 2 as a little girl friend for Enzo. And back then she was voiced by Andrea Liebman.
I told you we'd be together, Enzo. I downloaded a backup of myself onto your icon. The game let me out thinking I was you.
You can do that?
Apparently.
Cool.
When Enzo and Andrea went through the time warp, as it were, we needed an adult actress. And we brought on Sharon Alexander, who's got this lovely, smoky, sexy voice, because Andrea was, of course, a babe.
Oh, Bob.
ReBoot women were all tough. We didn't have any soft women on ReBoot, and Mouse was the toughest of them all. She wasn't a fitness model, she was a bodybuilder, and she carried a sword. Actually, she carried 2 swords, and could hack anything and kick anybody's ass.
You called, Sugar?
We had Louise Valens, who is this tiny little lady, and she was great at doing the southern drawl, Sugar, and brought Mouse to life.
That's what you hired me for, isn't it?
Brenda McCarthy was a mate of ours and a comic book artist from back in the day, and indeed he still is. And he did, I would say, 95% of the major design work on the show in the early days, and designed all the major characters, sets, stuff like that. He was one of the guys, without whom the show would not have been the show it was. His designs were different to the other stuff that was out there. He brought a lot of character to the characters, if you like. He also designed a lot of the props, a lot of the game stuff that we used in the show.
He's just standing there shooting at things.
I know! And in the next level, sprites are zombies. They've got flesh on their bones.
I don't even want to think about that. I mean, what kind of sick creature gets enjoyment out of playing this sort of game?
He would always bring you more designs than you asked for. You'd say, Brendan, we need a design for a gun for Bob to use in this game. And he'd go, okay. And he'd go away and he'd come back and he'd put like 3-4 sheets of designs in front of you and say, here are the designs for the gun that Bob uses. Oh, and by the way, here are these other designs. And he'd just give you a pile of paper that you hadn't asked for. One of the things he brought us was he drew Megabyte as a truck. He just gave it to us in a pile of designs for other stuff that we'd asked for. And we looked at it and said, Brendan, what the hell is this? He's like, Megabyte's a truck. It's cool, isn't it? And we're like, well, yeah, it is, but what's it for? He's like, oh, I don't know. I just had this idea. From that point forward, it was like, okay, we have to make this happen. We have to come up with an idea where we can somehow turn Megabyte into a truck and make an episode. And we did. We made the episode Bad Bob.
Megabyte? Frisket? I think we better find Bob.
And we then roped in a whole bunch of Mad Maxy style ideas where Bob was Mad Max and his car was Mad Max's car and Fong was in a gyrocopter and things like this. And that all just came out of Brendan's head, and that was what you got with Brendan. He'd always give you more than you asked for. It was always brilliant. It was always insane, but it was always brilliant. And he's one of the guys without whom the show just wouldn't have been what it was.
They finally really did it! The maniacs, they blew it up!
We tried to put multiple layers to the show in terms of what the viewers could get from it. And it paid off immediately because we'd get letters from grown men saying, I love your show and I watch it with my wife and I watch it with my 16-year-old and I watch it with my 12-year-old and I watch it with my 8-year-old. The show appealed on many levels. It was bright and colourful CGI for the little kids, and then for the slightly older kids it had some cool concepts and some cool video game ideas in there. And then for the grown-ups we had a bunch of quote-unquote adult references and things that the littler kids wouldn't get, but they got later because I've done a few conventions. And I get people coming up to me going, oh, I watched it when I was little and I loved it. And then I watched it when I was 12 and I started getting it. And then I watched it last week and you made a joke about so-and-so. And I didn't get that before, but now I do. So I think that's why we have such a passionate fan base who stay with it and show it to their kids. And now the kids show it to their kids, which makes me feel very old, but very happy.
Leaving so soon? How rude.
I'd love to see ReBoot come back somehow in some form. I'd love to see it, whether it's a movie or even a TV movie, another series, whatever. I'd love for it to continue, to return and to continue, as long as it stays true to its self and to its origins and to its past.
Hey Bob, what happened to your hair? It's so cool. And your costume, Alphanumeric. Can I have a costume like that? Or is that just a Guardian thing? Well, one day I'm gonna be a Guardian too, and then you'll see. So are we going jetballing again? You promised we would if I did my homework.
ReBoot will always hold a special place in my heart, and I love being part of the legacy of ReBoot. And you know, we're in the Smithsonian. It was the first ever CGI show. We have our little nook on our little shelf of history. We never knew for sure that we could pull it off. It took the best part of 10 years to get somebody to, you know, put up the cash and believe in us that we could get the show done and get it on air. I mean, now you look around and CGI is everywhere. There's CGI movies, CGI TV shows, everywhere you look. You can produce a cartoon on your cell phone these days. But back then, there was nothing like it, and we really were the first, and it was an amazing feeling after so long to finally to get it on air. And I love also the passion that the fans have for the show. I've done a few conventions, and I just have people coming up to me going, "Oh, you did ReBoot. I love ReBoot. Oh my God, you know, I love this and this now and stuff like that now. But you know, ReBoot's just, it's the show, man. You know, and I love that. So to be part of that legacy, I love it. It's great."
Game over, user.